Sweet Taste of Cake by The Descendant. Chapter 6. Certain Advice. When Carrot slapped his forehead with his hoof, he was careful to avoid the dollop of frosting that still sat on his nose. For the first time that morning, something had gone wrong. Something that threatened their creation. The silver packets, wrapped tightly with bows of simmering paper, stood before them on the table. This was a problem, as they had meant it for it to be discovered when the gingerbread house was eaten. In short, they both realized as they looked at each other with looks of concern, they had messed up. Cupcake brought him 2 long sanctions for decisiveness coming into play. To their annoyance, their housework had been too good. The foundation already set, the prowess with the frosting working against them. As they had set the gingerbread carefully upon the twin sanctions, they made sure it supported the structure, that the walls were now taking the entire weight of the gingerbread house. With that, she passed them a fine-toothed knife and went to work removing the foundation. Carrot's practiced hose set a knife against the seam of frosting that held the walls to the foundation. The entirety of the project was now on the line, and together they would have the scissors to make if they were to save it. He looked up at her. With a nod, he told him to press on, and her mind went back to another time she had made a decision.
We'll have browns and beds and oranges, and there will be pumpkins and corn dogs, and we'll go bobbing for apples if there's a haywagon, right? Oh, hey, where are you? Get a wagon. Do any of our neighbors have wagons we can borrow? Oh, we could have neighbors come too. But wait, do you have wagons already with a wagon, right? That wouldn't be much fun. But how about we could ride a wagon and then...
Clot sat at the dinner table, watched her go through yet another detailed, essentially breathless description of a party she was playing. They had never had a nightmare party here on the farm. They had carved pumpkins, told a ghost story or two, had a few snacks, but then it was off to bed. There was work to be done, after all. But these last few months she had found her cutie mark had been different. Everything had become different. They were all different. As their mother placed their dinner upon the table, Clyde was able to interrupt her implores long enough to make a lead and invoke. And soon she was once again pouring forth her to Inky, Blinky, and Maud, the other 3 fillies each showing supreme interest in their sister's vision. Clyde stared down the length of the table, past where Pinky waved enthusiastically as he named all sorts of autumnal ideals was to festoon her celebration, and looked to where his wife sat and ate her small share of the meal. Roxy caught his eyes upon her and gave him a small smile. She gave him a big sigh, and soon took a look of a sound expiration across his face. Clyde waited as Roxy's reply came across the table, mouthed wordlessly over the continuing irritation of their pink daughter. "It'll be okay," she told him without words. "We'll get through it." He smiled back at her. He knew she was right. Still, these last months had been happy, but it was not those weekly, and sometimes even more frequent celebrations did not come at a cost. Autumn was a time for he and his fellow geoculturists to begin gathering in their rocks. The harvest, the magic of Equestria that had settled within them as the blessed sun had fallen over them during the summer. A delay of a day may not mean much, but it did mean more work for him, and he knew he was not getting any younger. Abruptly and prophetically, a single one of his gray hairs of his mate drifted down to his plate, punishing his meal. Carefully he removed it, looked at it for a second before laying it aside and returning to his supper. The purpose of her mark, he realized, needed to reveal itself. There had to be a way for her to do so, or he would soon be fat with party food and bald from worry. Piggy's tearful reflections soon faded as he ate, going up and down in time without however much food she was simultaneously trying to eat and voice her ideas. "Piggamina," her mother scolded in soft tones. "Now is the time for eating."
"Okie dokie,"
replied the filly, settling back into her seat as her 3 sisters giggled slightly and returned to their own meals. Small conversation arose from around the table as the dried leaves of autumn floated around the farm, casting against the silo, the barn, and upon the very rocks that gave the farm its purpose. The city of Ponyville was alive with the warm evening as lights fell upon the faces of pumpkins that baubled in the candlelight.
Oh, look! That whole building is faced up for Nightmare Nat!"
came the voice of a small pony. Carrot turned to look upon the next visitor to his shop. He stood in the doorway, the double boiler disguised as a cauldron wherein stood melted caramel. Apples stood impaled upon their sticks nearby, drying in the night air as he tried to find who would be the next to come and receive his offered treat. The bakery had been dressed up. It looked more like a gingerbread house now, and the change was permanent. The ploy had been cupcakes out of advertisement. He settled over 3 little figures that smiled at him. He looked to the older pony who was guiding him. As he did, an awareness slowed down. As he removed the gauze from his face, he realized he was looking at either the very worst Princess Celestia costume in the history of Equestria, or the very best cupcake costume that any pony could imagine. He went with the latter. He looked at the 3 little colts and fillies who looked up at him with big smiles, and then back to her. As 1,000 questions shook through him, he looked at her. His puzzlement became apparent even beneath his costume.
This is our Cupcake's good friend, Mr. Carrot Cake. What do you say? Nightmare night, butterfly, give us something sweet to bite.
Chimed out the costume trio. As they did, she smiled at him, her fake wings and horn bouncing around, and heaved back at her as the gauze once more slipped from his eyes.
Alright, come over here and we'll make you some apples.
Cupcake watched contently as the foals gathered around him, and he showed them how to carefully cover the apple, spin it around to give it an even coat. With that, he held the caramel apple up, and let it simply dry on the rack covered with appropriate decorations.
So, is this your shop?
Asked the little colt tearfully as he and his sister selected their apples.
Yep. Cupcakes Carrot Bakery Comp LLC Inc. That name's really stinko,
replied the colt.
Careful for your apple,
replied Carrot, his mummy costume hiding a scowl as he did not want Cupcake to see. She giggled as he looked at her and saw her adjusting her costume once more.
You don't need to put business cards on these,
she said as he lifted the crown farther up her head and helped it sell.
Saves up for the paying customers, you know.
Right, he agreed, his voice becoming softer as he gazed over the mare.
Sure thing, Princess Auntie Cupcake.
The two looked at one another, and then down at the colt and fillies that differed excitedly as their creations came to life. Adding the business cards to the strings that bound the completed apple together had been Cupcake's idea, as was having him show off his confectionery skills here at the shop. As dozens of Hyper Nightmare Night celebrants had trotted away from his bakery, he knew she had been right, as he always had been. Soon the caramel apples were ready, and he wrapped them up and set them aside for the foals to pick up after the night celebrations were done. As the 3 foals met with friends who were soon to make apples of their own, Cupcake and Carrot smiled happily, seeing how excited the foals had been. He looked at Princess Cupcake once more, and again helped her adjust herself. I will be remiss if I did not do this at least once. Princess Cupcake! Thank you. Now back to your story. Their costumes were perfect metaphors. His was well done, but not suited to him. Hers an excellent idea, but needs some small touches. Between them, they both knew that if the other had been involved, his practiced touch and her firm decisiveness, they would have turned out better. We should help each other out with our costumes next year. Maybe even wear matching costumes?
Yes, we should,
she giggled. As the sounds of the Nightmare Night celebration lifted beyond, the focus of the foals shifted there. At once he felt her hoof come to his mouth, dropping the gauze that stood there. For a long second he lifted to kiss him, and then sheepishly turned to her nephews and nieces. Seeing them still distracted, she risked nuzzling beneath him, let the fake horn fall and the wings shudder, and then moved out into the street again. You look good with kids. I mean, you look like you're good with kids, he breathed.
Yes, we do. I am,
she answered, buzzing at her subconscious selections and words. He watched the 4 head off as a new group of foals gathered to his conjuring. He saw her look back at him with a smile as he departed. As he led the next group through the making of their apples, he thought about what she had just done. She had just introduced him to her family. Well, kinda. She had chosen the word friend, not let on that they were involved. She had hidden their kiss from him. Why had she done that? He pondered this for a moment, only stopping when a shock of pain from hot caramel went up his foreleg. Still, she had taken the risk, gotten that much farther, taken another step in the game of this. He searched the distance for her as his imperfect princess disappeared into the crowd. He knew it was now his turn to give her a reason to offer more. Time moved forward, as though it were a stage direction. Time drove onward, but the scene went largely unchanged. Only the final fall of the leaves as the hosts of the runners pelted past showed the participants in the game that the world of the two principal actors was drawing closer together.
Jeez, Mom, I told you she was coming.
I meant to straighten up. Get straightened up, began Cheesecake as he gave a small tremble and ran the breast across her coat in a worried motion. As he looked on, Carrot dumped various things into the hall closet. I did get a few things out to eat so we could have a nice chat, she said, looking first to him and then back up to the door. A shadow across the nearby window showed the outline of a mare who waited patiently to be shown inside.
It's all right, Mom. Just let me put these away,
Carrot said as he placed more items within. He turned to see his thin mother looking toward the door, her hoof to her mouth. Slowly he walked to her and laid his head against hers. I don't want to embarrass. She's gonna love you, Mom, he interrupted. Just be you and everything will be fine. With that, he opened the door, and Cupcake entered his childhood home. The conversation went surprisingly well. Soon the two mares had made their introductions, were complimenting each other on how wonderfully their maids had been made up, how nicely the flowers were arranged, and how beautiful the drapes were. By the time they were discussing the best local hairdressers, pony pedicures, and all the other things that appealed to mares, including that wonderful little white filly who is right now working at the dress shop, Carrot had suddenly remembered that he was, in point of fact, a stallion. As such, that type of talk essentially made him wish for nothing more than a sweet taste of death.
I'll get us something to eat,
he said as he stood and went to the kitchen. He tried out into the old familiar space and looked into the cupboards. He found it shockingly bare. Soon, the jelly cupboard and the pantry too proved to be essentially empty. Old worries went through his mind. In an instant, he had thrown his head into the icebox. It took him a second to realize that all that stood within the box was a box of baking soda, an old bottle of milk, and a tray of cheese with a few handfuls of crackers. He realized it was probably all that he had thought to make up. Oh, Mom, he whispered as some of the fears he had long held for her when he moved came back to life. Why was there no food? When was the last he had eaten a real meal? He looked at the tray and brought it into the living room.
I'm going to run out for a second, he said. Grab some things, I'll be right back.
He realized that the mares had barely even heard him. Cheesecake was far too busy showing Cupcake any number of embarrassing pictures of him as a foal from the wide selection of albums that were coming off the shelf. As they giggled, he rolled his eyes and slipped out the door. He had intended to head for the market, maybe grab up enough produce and cheeses to make a proper meal. As he turned down his old familiar street into the Fountain Square, he witnessed something that made him stop and have his jaw drop open. As ponies hurried past him in the opposite direction, a booming, rumbling voice drove down and then back up again with a call of rage. Soon, it was high on an endless stream of curses that drove even more ponies away from the area in fear. As Carrot looked behind the monument, he saw why. A carriage stood there, the driver and two ponies who were supposed to be pulling it looking on in horror. They tried to get out of their harnesses as a great fast stallion circling, foaming and hissing.
Come on out here, you son of a bitch!
Shrieked Quarry, ramming his shoulder against the carriage so hard that it shook.
I recognize the smell of your damn cologne the second you across that bridge! Didn't you think you ever have to see me again, did ya? Did ya?
Carrot shook as Quarry once more rammed himself against the carriage. He saw the huge stallion literally lifted off two of its wheels. The carriage only righting itself when the stallion skidded on the wet leaves that stood across the cobblestones. To Carrot's horror, the loud scream of the filly foal began to rise within.
Never thought you had to see me again, huh? The way you and your damn little cabal sold me out in the grocery market? You thought you'd never have to pay me for leaving me standing in the street working where in the world you got up to? Not leaving me one bit!
You thought you go bucking? Carrot stared in fascinated horror as Quarry literally ripped the door handle off the carriage. As the door flopped open, Quarry fell from the running boards to the ground, crying in pain and then heaving for breath. Carrot looked up to the carriage. Within, he saw the horrified face of a well-dressed unicorn stallion, with his forelegs across the mare, and a little filly who screamed in fear. The stallion shielding him, even as fear grew across his face. Oh, Celestia! Quarry! Unicorn stallion stammered as though he were just realizing who this frothy earth pony was. That was decades, years! As Quarry rose, he roared and bellowed. At once, the unicorn's magic snapped the door shut. In a rage, his eyes alive with wrath, Quarry threw the handle awkwardly at the carrot as best he could with a trembling hoof. Carrot felt his hoof go to his mouth as he saw it strike the driver. The poor pony fell from his seat, cussing at his forehead. Even as he fell, the two other ponies fought to get out of their harness. Now one tried to reach for his fallen partner. He climbed up to the carrots and was literally ripping at the satin roof with tooth and mouth. Come out! Come out, you undersucker! Go bugger! He called as he reached within, ripping away at the carrots as long strips of satin came up and around him, drafted to settle along the leaves that littered the ground. Carrot's heart went to his throat, his ears drumming. The sight of Quarry fizzing through the roof of the carrots, the fearful shrieks of the filly within, the calls for help from her mother, and the unicorn stallion calling to Quarry. All these painted a picture of Quarry in Carrot's mind that horrified him, a picture that made him shake and tremble. Never thought of it, did ya? Never thought I'd actually be waiting for the chance to drag my two out of you, huh? Now you're in Ponyville! My Ponyville! And ain't nobody gonna save your... At once, the driver, blood streaming across his forehead, leapt for Quarry. As the driver fought Quarry, the stallion turned, kicked, and butted a curse. Quarry! Erupted a familiar voice. One that sounded horrified as Carrot felt. You know, in my head canon, you know, the driver who does fight Quarry, that is the bravest stallion to ever live. Thank you, man. Carrot saw Quarry's enraged features lift, and though it disarranged, a great flash of unicorn magic flashed deep from within the carrots. At once, Quarry fell backwards. He paddled through the air and went to the ground on the far side of the carrots. A quick motion on the other side betrayed the driver, giving Quarry a kick, receiving his hoof to the midsection in a reply that lifted him high into the air, gasping for his seat. Go! Go! Called the bleeding driver. With that, the two other ponies grasped for their harnesses and pulled at the carrots with all their resolve. With a start, it went out past the fountain to the road beyond. As it went, the cries of the foal hovered over it, disappeared in a horrid soundtrack that lingered in Carrot's mind. Carrot stood there beside the fountain, looking to where some small breezes kicked the leaves into where the deformed Quarry lay. The big stallion lifting his head and fought to his hoofs. There, Quarry! Called a familiar voice again, revealing itself to be Ledger. As the other earth pony trotted up, Quarry stood there, fighting to breathe as his friend looked him up and down. I don't want to know what that was about, damn it! Spoke Ledger in a tone like he had at the mill long ago. The way that filly was crying, I thought you were killing lamb. Carrot saw a look of shock go across Quarry's face. Slowly, the immense stallion looked at Ledger. A look of realization growing on his face of a stallion that suddenly looked a lot older than Carrot remembered him. There was a filly? Ah, his wife too. What in the well is wrong with her, Quarry? You said that. Oh, well. Look at you. You're still breathing hard. Carrot peeked from behind a mountain. To his immense surprise, he saw that Quarry was taking deep breaths. Even the pounding of the stallion's heart seemed almost palpable, as though his huge frame was studying in tune. His muscles ripped beneath the tan coat, Shocks of gray among the black mane seeming more obvious as the stallion lifted his head in tune with each breath. The autumn air sat around the fountain square as ponies began drifting once more, some looking on as Quarry lifted his head and raised his hoof. Carrot could scarcely believe it when Legend leaned in and let the other stallion brace against him. You'll soon have a heart attack, Quarry, if you don't find a way out of this rage, said Ledger in a voice Carrot could barely hear. You'll be dead of a stroke or such, Quarry, if you can't find a way out. Together they turned to leave the park, Quarry leaning against Ivory's father like a prize fighter being led from the ring. I don't like being used, Ledger. I don't like anybody stealing from me, but against me. Said the winded stallion as he walked away. I'm no pony's fool. Carrot walked to the other side of the fountain. To his surprise, Ledger's eyes were on him, giving him an unpassionate glance. Carrot quickly nodded and began to speak. Ledger gave a quick shake of his head. Carrot closed his mouth. Ledger nodded slightly and contemplated Carrot for an instant. Ledger then turned to Quarry and spoke as he let the stallion off. Not every pony's against you, Quarry. Not every pony wants something from you. Ledger said with a sigh, I hope you realize that before it's too late. Carrot heard Quarry give a small chuckle of disbelief. He watched the two walk off, his mind lost in what he had just witnessed. There was no time to head to the market. Instead, he went back to his bakery and grabbed something he thought would make a decent lunch for Cupcake and his mother. As he did, he thought of Quarry, and wondered what had made him the type of pony that would do such things. Wondered if he would ever find peace. He also fought very hard about finding any way he could to never end up on that stallion's bad side. He hoped that the treats that he had been bringing him in his secretary every other week with the loan payments had been helping. Carrot flung the food into the salad bags and then went off once more to his mother's house. As he once more passed through the market square, he slowed as he saw pieces of satin drifting about, the fragments catching against the fountain, mixing with the fallen leaves. In his mind's eye, he saw himself under the rays of the stallion. Mentally, he checked to make sure that the check was due next week, not this. With a shudder, he trotted on. Arriving outside his childhood home, he glanced in through the window to see Cupcake standing in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water and running over some more of the serving knife of a tray of crackers and cheese. He opened the breezeway door quietly, the one inside even more so. He began to cross her quiet hooves toward the kitchen, hoping to surprise her. He smiled as he thought of making her shriek and then gather her into an embrace. He certainly could use one after what he had just witnessed. To his surprise, another phantom crossed on the side of the far room, past the pantry and the laundry room, the mare laying her hoof on Cupcake's shoulder. As Cupcake jumped in alarm, the knife clattering into the sink, Carrot felt himself lowering into the little alcove beside the door, the one where all manners of jackets and umbrellas seemed to go unused for a time. For the second time in the late morning, he watched two ponies in conversation. Oh, I'm so sorry, spoke his mother in her ethereal tone, the one that made all who heard it wondering if she was not just slightly ill. I didn't mean to scare you, Cupcake. I'm sorry. No, it's okay. I'm startled a bit, don't you know? Answered Cupcake with a small laugh. The two mares reassured each other. His mother's foreleg still lifted Cupcake. For a moment, she held this pose and then slowly lowered it. Her head went down with it, and with a small sound, he saw Cupcake's tilt as though in worry. Cupcake? His mother's voice came small. I have to ask, what are you hiding from my son? Carrot had to stifle a breath and was glad that Cupcake's gas hit as well. Is it that obvious? Answered Cupcake. He knows. He knows that there's reasons why I told him that there was something. Please tell Cupcake. I'm doing it for the both of us. To his surprise, his mother lifted her head and laid it across Cupcake's withers. With small motions, Cupcake answered. She lifted her own head and placed it across his mother until a soft sigh came from the older mare. It's okay, spoke his mother, her tone stronger than before. I know. I'm a mare too. We have our reasons for doing these things. We do these things to protect those that we love from hurt and harm. The mares lifted their heads and looked at one another. You don't have to tell me, but Cupcake, don't let it keep you from love. Don't let it keep you from spending time in love, because it can disappear. Cupcake pressed himself firmer into the alcove, hid himself as he felt his mother's words. Somehow, he sensed that he was about to learn things that he had never taken the time to tell him. Perhaps things he had not known how to tell him. I offered singing and dancing lessons. I had a wonderful partner I haven't seen in years when I was your age. My mark isn't for cooking. It's about helping ponies find that special mark within themselves. Cheese can become a cake after all, you see. My friend and I, we would go dance at clubs and then offer lessons to the colts we batted our eyes at. His mother felt her head back and forth. I had this one colt, this one stallion, who kept coming back to me. Kept coming back long and long after he had learned all I could teach him. We danced. I danced long into the night. Danced until morning. We collapsed upon one another and watched Lesia's sunrise. It was only then I realized why he was coming back. I was that thing that was special to him. He was in love. Psst. I fell in love with his love and fell in love with him for loving me. I could see things us together so clearly. Wanted him with me forever, and he did too. We opened ourselves to one another, loved one another in mind, heart, and spirit, physically. As we saw visions of our lives together, we opened up our magic and agreed to that love. Here in this house, in the room on top of the stairs. On that very bed, my carrot was conceived. Carrot leaned past the alcove door, swallowed hard as he tried to let the facts of what was about to be stated flow past him. He looked up to see Cupcake placing her hoof to her mouth. Wait a minute. I just heard the story of how my mom and dad banged. Booked out. Sweet Celestia, no! He was called back to active duty as soon as I started the show. And every day it seemed I received a letter. It would ask how I was doing, outlined plans for us, counted down the numbers of days until he completed his tour. Oh God. Then one day they stopped. They stopped. Part of me wondered if he had found another pony, a different mare. But I didn't believe it. I think of how he sat, how he stroked me, how he ran his hoof across my stomach, across his foal. I wouldn't believe it. Cheesecake lifted her head to face Cupcake. Tears just visible at the edges of her eyes. Then, after 2 weeks, I got a letter from someone in his regiment. Yeah, had been an accident. He'd been dead for 2 weeks. He was burned up in a magical fire, a training exercise gone wrong. Lost 2 weeks before, and I didn't even know about it. Since we weren't married, the army didn't know to tell me, and they, the members of his regiment, only thought to do it when emptying his things. Found my letters. 4 days later, I was in labor. Carrot bit hard and tried his best not to make any sounds as the horrible noise of his mother's sniffle filled the room. I never feel the loss of Carrot's father's love. And Cupcake, as Carrot grew, I tried to replace it. When I thought Carrot was old enough, I started dating. But not dating. Tried to capture the feel of love, but not the pain it could bring. I brought stallions to this house. To the very bed. Very bed. Carrot bit down once more, struggled against the memories of his uncles, who lasted in her life for 2, maybe 3 weeks. Some pretended to be his friend, asked about his toys and hobbies. Some could have cared less. None of them were worth remembering. One terrifying night, one had stood outside his bedroom door for an hour as he tried his hardest to pretend to be asleep. The eyes of the stranger lying upon him. One night, when he was 14 or 13, he had awoke to the awful, devastating sounds of one calling her things, yelling her to do things. He would have taken to staring at one in a heartbeat. When I reached 45, my hips started to show through my coat. Lines began to show under my eyes. The stallion stopped looking. I realized that I've been trying to replace love with sex. It didn't work, Cupcake. It didn't work, and I was just left here in this house, alone. His mother continued, voicing the truth that the teenage Carrot wished she would have the strength to tell her. But I realized that there had always been love in this house. The love of Carrot's father was still here. In Carrot. He lifted his head, dared to look a little closer to the door. There he was as his mother raised her once more, as though in pain. He watched gratefully as Cupcake gathered his mother's hoof to hers as the 2 mares stood there in the sun that came through the kitchen window. He earned his mark down there in this kitchen, baking for us, making our meals. The day it came, I was up there. Came down new to find it dry. I didn't know the carrot cake I had thrown away had given him his mark until he came home. The damn teacher and his schoolmates knew it before I did. I'm his mother. I was right up there, next to some. His mother gave a single praying brawl and leaned forward, Cupcake gathering her up. He never stopped loving me. Never gave up on me. He always stopped at the top of stairs before going off, listening for my breath. When I realized that he was the love of my life, that I should be living for him, finding my love through watching him grow, I turned to him. Cheesecake took another series of strained breaths. Turned to him and looked up to see that he had already grown up. He was ready to start his own life. I missed my chance to be a proper mother, Cupcake. I lost love twice. First, the love of his father, and then the chance to honor our love through his son. Carrot blinked through a few tears, saw his mother looking through herself through Cupcake's withers. His thin, worn, haggard, beautiful, radiant mother looked down to Cupcake's now understanding, rosy eyes. I won't ask you to tell me what it is you're keeping from him or me, but Cupcake, I can see it's hurting you. My Carrot. My son is full of love, Cupcake. He's alive with love. He loves you. Yes. Yes, he is.
I know he is. He is so wonderful.
You heard Cupcake answer, her own voice tinged in tears.
Don't miss out on it. Don't waste a second of it,
said his mother, laying her head to Cupcake's.
It can disappear, Cupcake. Whatever it is that's keeping you from opening yourself all the way to him, to his love, don't let it rule you. Clear it away as soon as you can, my dear. Let love deal with your fears.
Carrot stood there. It was perhaps the most profound thing he had ever heard his mother say, drifted across the tiles of the kitchen, where he had made so many breakfasts. As the two mares embraced each other once more, he quietly slid back outside. The autumn sun fell over him, golden and full. Leaves flit down the street. Overhead, Pegasi flipped from cloud to cloud, playing in the light. Including that one cute little adorable Siren Pegasus playing with that cute little yellow Pegasus right over there. They were using these last few warm days to enjoy life. Enjoy it before the snows were scheduled to fall. With a single sniffle, he turned back within the house. As he did, he made sure to make the doors ring out loudly behind him. "I'm back!" he called out, pretending that he did not notice them until the last second. "Oh, you're both here in the kitchen. I brought lunch." He spoke in a tone of falsified ignorance. He looked upon him as his mother tried to hide one last tear, and Cupcake turned to him. He could not help but smile as the two mares he loved most in the world looked up to him with broad smiles of their own. "It was so lovely to meet you," intoned Cupcake, leaning in for one more hug from Cheesecake, the older mare patting her on the shoulder as he did. "Please, don't be a stranger," added Cupcake, releasing the younger mare to look into them both. Her blue eyes flashed with happiness at seeing them together. Her smile only grew when her gangly son leaned down and planted a kiss upon her cheek. "Love you, Mom. Be sure to eat something for dinner, okay?" With that, they were off. At first, Carrot thought they were heading back to the bakery, and from there, Cupcake would leave him once more, head off alone to the place that he promised not to follow. To his surprise, they slid past the bakery, as though it were no more than a street-side garbage pail or a mailbox. He began as he turned to watch his ginger-trimmed residence and place of occupation recede. Soon, he felt her leaning against him, asking for his strength. He went silent and followed her little turns, caught up by her offered hoof as he turned down the familiar streets. It was not that he had never been to this part of Ponyville. It was just that he never had any real reason to linger on the roads or stately homes. At once a thought went through him. At once, worries that she had been living in some sort of flophouse, or had been living in some sort of institution with curfews and rules against coach visiting, all disappeared. Instead, they stopped at a corner under a lamppost. As the afternoon dawned around them, Cupcake pointed to a large house that stood back on the road. Spread out before it, a long pathway led past a tall fence leading into a wide porch. The house itself was very strong and sturdy looking, with exposed pillars and a lone look, one that seemed to blend into the landscape rather than stand out from it. To Carrot's surprise, the same three foals who had visited him on Nightmare Night played in the piles of leaves upon the lawn as their school bags rested nearby. "That's my house. That's where I live," she said haltingly. "This is where I come when we say goodnight." Carrot stuttered for a moment when he looked up at the house. It was beautiful, large. It was hers. It was hers? "It's beautiful," he said as he took a step forward. "No!" she cried, grabbing for him. Her hoof caught around his stifle, and he tripped a little. He turned and looked at her with confusion and pain on his face. She was taking steps backwards, her hoof falls sounding out across the cobblestones. As she turned, she looked at him once more. Her rose-colored eyes flashed with thought, and he sensed things were moving behind him. He followed silently, watched her head flashing around and peered deep within the crowds of ponies that went by. They trotted up within the gazebo, the same one where the first date had begun. No band sat within the space now, and only the cool breeze that battled the sun of a warm autumn day met them there. Carrot watched as he trotted back with a one worried look. 1,000 questions went through his mind as he watched her, and the worry he felt for Cupcake only grew. Cupcake? He asked. Why? Who? Why didn't you want me to know about your house? I was worried that you were living in a shack, or... At once she turned to him and laid her head against his chest once more. He recognized his pose, what she was asking him. Slowly he sat, allowed her to move deeper into him, lay her head there more fully. As the autumn light began to fall, she spoke. He listened as he tried to explain what was happening without explaining it, as she tried to detail the new twists and turns that the game of this was taking. Carrot, she said, not raising herself from his chest. Your mother told me something that made quite a bunch of sense. He thought of the conversation that transpired within the kitchen. I really want to tell you everything, show you everything, but I can't, she continued, a small note of panic in her voice. I'm sorry, I just can't. I don't want you to end up like the other cults. I don't. Carrot ran his hoe through her mane, parted the rosy tones as she continued to lie against his chest. She leaned to him even more as he did, as though allowing some of her worry to pass him with each gentle stroke. He realized why she had done it, why she had shown him the house, the large house where her nieces and nephews rolled about laughing on the lawn. He had wanted her to open himself, and as she had as much as she thought she could. He ran up his hoof down her back, caressing the mare as he felt her breath. She was trying so hard, trying to reach for his love while hiding something from her, still trying desperately to play the game she had set up. At once his vision of her lying close to him, secure in his embrace as the soft life drifted over him. That vision filled him, and he longed for it. But for right now, this was all he could offer. So he ran his hoof across her and let her breathe. I know you're trying so hard to be patient, she said as she wiped her face against his chest. Waiting on me too. Please don't stop trying, Cat. Oh, Carrot, please don't stop trying. Of course, his body told her as Carrot drew her in closer, of course. As the cool breeze won the contest, and great shafts of celestial sun faded around him, he lifted himself. He looked down to her as she looked up to him. Cupcake, how about some dinner? Then I can walk you. Can I walk you part of the way home? Maybe just as a lamppost? Yes, she answered, lifting her nose and closing her eyes. Oh, yes, I think that would do nicely. Slowly, they rubbed their noses. He took her up in her hoof, and he went down to the village to their dinner as the wind tossed the dried leaves across the path around the gazebo.